Quackity quack. We are backity back with another episode of the Duck on a Rock Sports Podcast. I'm Colin McDonough, joined by Matt McDonough, and behind the glass, our producer, Matt We Met. Tonight, the first question, Matt, is which Candle in the Wind version did you like better from Elton John? The one about Marilyn Monroe or Princess Diana?
Well, wouldn't the Princess Diana one be a little? It should be considered a little bit better, right? It's a little more. It's a little bit more emotionally involved.
I mean, yeah, I think, well, the first one was 11 years after Monroe's death. But yeah, I mean, both are very good. Well, speaking of candles in the wind, there is a new candle at UConn. Uh, when we last recorded, we had a list of possible replacements for head coach Jim Mora of the UConn football team. None of those replacements got hired. But Duck on a Rock, now we'll talk about the man who we might have overlooked, but David Benedict certainly didn't. Jason Candle, formerly the Toledo head coach and now leader of the UConn Huskies football program. Matt, what were your first thoughts on the hire once it kind of came into focus at the end of last week?
Well, I do like the hire a lot. Obviously, like as a UConn fan, you want to like who they hire, and even if it wasn't on our list, obviously we're clearly not making the call or the interviews or part of the hiring practice at all. We're just kind of throwing our names out there, seeing if we got any right. And even though we didn't, it's cool to get a guy with the success of Candle. Um, he hasn't really left the state of Ohio much, which we'll get to, but it's cool that one. Not that I know a lot of Toledo fans on Twitter were kind of comparing the two football programs, but if you look at the Motor City Bowl of 20, almost 21 years ago, UConn did pretty well against Toledo then, but obviously overall Toledo's been a great team in the MAC. A lot of it is thanks to Candle and his predecessors, but he had a very successful decade in Toledo. The MAC is very up and down. If you look at what Chuck Martin's done at Miami of Ohio, he's been pretty consistent, but a lot of the MAC, you might have a good year when the MAC or at least be in Detroit for the MAC championship game, and then you kind of drop. So for a guy like Candle, who's been to 7 bowls, including this season, he's been bowl eligible 9 times. He was 6-6 in 2019. I think they were the only bowl eligible team not to receive a bid. So that's pretty impressive. And they've won 2 MAC championship games and won another division to reach a MAC championship. They got an appearance. They lost the game, but it's cool to see someone with that resume at a school come to UConn. And I'm sure you'll speak kind of a little bit of the surprising nature of it in a way as well.
Yeah, I think that Jason Candle being hired at UConn, I feel like we would have thought of him almost maybe more when they hired Jim Mora. Me and you always talk about MAC coaches rising the ranks, usually going to a Big Ten school, and then, I mean, more times than not, flaming out. But Candle was almost probably on your radar, Matt, a little more, 4 to 5 years ago as a possible UConn coach. Him staying at Toledo instead of going to a Big Ten school or anywhere else kind of makes him, again, to our point, we forgot about him, right? David Benedict didn't. That's why his salary is about $1 million. And our sponsorship money for Duck on a Rock so far is about $1 million less than that. So if you look at Candle's resume, as you said, winning conference championships, that is an important thing we talked about last episode as far as like Kurt Signetti, who added a Big Ten championship to his resume, but even some of the names we mentioned, like a Jerry Mack, who won Conference USA, right? Or no? Yeah, Conference USA or some. Which one?
That was what? Because JMU won the Sun Belt, right?
Yeah, so Kennesaw State beating
Yeah,
Jacksonville
Jacksonville
State's
State.
Conference USA. But
Yeah, it's
like,
tough to keep track of this
yeah,
movement.
ever changing conferences. But when you look at Candle winning two, him going to 8 bowl games, never having losing season, this to me, this hire from Benedict is almost a mix between his two best and most famous hires during his time at UConn. In a way, Jason Candle is a little bit of Dan Hurley. Hurley having success at Wagner than Rhode Island, and seeing potential in him as someone who would be someone to take the next step for UConn and take the next step at UConn with the potential to be a great head coach. And I think Candle is a little bit of Benedict looking at more as Candle being a guy that was not really on many people's radars or lists as far as talking about UConn's open coaching vacancy or a lot of other jobs, right? He was not rumored for a lot of other jobs. So just like Benedict getting more back into coaching, a few years ago and having success with that, just like Benedict getting Hurley to the next step. Even if some Toledo fans on Twitter don't think UConn is that much better of a job, even though 2004 Motor City Bowl, or just in general, as far as the fame of the athletics department and possibility of getting into major conference, like this hire from Benedict kind of combined his like two best thought processes into one hire.
Yeah, the other thing not being overlooked, but just and obviously Jim Mora, as we mentioned, too, pretty in shape guy. Looks young and stuff. Candle, we don't judge. I know, Matt, we met behind the glass, but we don't judge how hair looks here. But Candle
Yeah, no,
being,
we may not all be on the same boat. But we're all in the same ocean right now.
we're that for sure. And then Candle having a little bit of gray. He is 46 years old, so he has a lot of coaching left, and you'd hope you could compare Toledo and UConn as football teams, but there's no comparison in terms of schools, as well as no comparison, despite the fact Nick Saban coached at Toledo a year before the Browns. There's no comparison with athletic departments and that success. So Candle, it's kind of shocking to see him make the jump to UConn, but if you're him at 46 without there is the opportunity for upward mobility from the MAC. Clearly, that's kind of been the conference's coaching carousel. What they're well known for is poaching MAC coaches, but he somehow just didn't get hired. I'm trying to think, even remembering had he been in the conversations for some school, maybe when Brett Bielema got hired at Illinois. Not sure if he was mentioned for Michigan State after Mel Tucker got fired and they hired Jonathan Smith, which Jonathan Smith, again, he was trying to get out of Oregon State, like we said last week, and that worked terribly. When Pat Fitzgerald moved on, uh, had to move on from Northwestern due to that hazing scandal, and that he's kind of been settled / cleared of, and gets the Michigan State job this time around. Northwestern promoted their interim coach. So even in the Big Ten, where you would kind of see the MAC coaches maybe get a shot, there hasn't been a ton of opportunities for Candle to land one of those jobs. When we already talked about Wisconsin last week, so the last few years maybe being stuck there and maybe looking for the next opportunity. And as you said, hopefully UConn gets in to a conference during his tenure here, and then he could move up, or hey, he's a power four coach at UConn, which will never happen at Toledo. And he already accomplished everything aside from a college football playoff berth as the G5 representative at Toledo, which the MAC doesn't seem to be in that conversation from a talent standpoint, as well as how their schedules are with a lot of bye games at the beginning of the year. The conference champions can be 7-5 in the MAC because they play, the bye games against the Ohio States and Michigans a lot of the time. So it's probably a good move for him for a change of scenery. He has, again, he went to high school in Ohio. He's from Ohio. He did spend looking it up, he spent 2 years at Geneva College, which is in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, according to Wikipedia. Then he transferred to Mount Union, won 2 national championships there. And then Mount Union assistant, won a couple more national championships. I think 3 national championships as an assistant, and then has been at Toledo since 2009 as an assistant. And then coincidentally, you have Matt Campbell leaving Iowa State for Penn State. And I know Candle was mentioned as floating before the UConn job was signed, sealed, and delivered. That maybe Iowa State want Candle out there. But
Yeah,
Candle
there's some rumors, or
Matt
even
Campbell
and
in
then did they
2015.
mention Tulane?
Yeah, well, yeah, and Tulane, because Tulane, the LSU defensive coordinator, backed out because I think Kiffin gave him a big pay raise to stay.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, Tulane with maybe Mac goes to Tulane. I don't know if at the time of this, it's been an NBA and NFL day. I don't know if at the time of this Tulane's hired the coach because Hoff went from Southern Miss to Memphis. So Mac, the Memphis native, is no longer in the running for Memphis. But
Yeah.
Candle replaced Matt Campbell. Jason Candle replaced Matt Campbell in 2015 when Campbell left for Iowa State for the bowl game, and then he held on to the job. So he's been in Ohio for pretty much his entire life, just like I know our executive producer has been more transient than us, but we've been in Connecticut pretty much our whole life. So he makes a move. And I remember when we worked at the Current, even when Diaco got hired, I wanted Matt Campbell to come here from Toledo, and he stayed on, went to Iowa State, now Penn State. So maybe it's not Campbell, it's Candle, and maybe a decade later, UConn has a guy with some staying power just based off his age, his success, and I feel like he doesn't make the move from Ohio to Connecticut, making this jump just from a lifestyle and living perspective, unless he had in mind the success and potential that he can accomplish and achieve here.
Yeah, and the other thing too with that for Candle, it's not like Jim Mora just went to Stanford or UCLA, whether it be a Big Ten or an ACC school. Jim Mora didn't go to a Power Four school from UConn, so it's not like Candle looked at UConn and sensed immediately, if I do well here, I can make a quick jump somewhere vastly better than UConn or Toledo or whatever it may be. And I think too, to your point about, Candle, as far as, we watch Maction a lot in November. I love Maction, after Halloween, daylight savings time, it gets darker earlier. And then on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, you're in the 200s for the channels searching for random Mac games that has about 20 people in them. Great, winter weatherscapes already. Where again, if he's accomplished, like you said, everything there is to accomplish in the MAC without getting to the playoff, he's won 2 conference titles, another division, made and won bowl games, never had a losing season at Toledo. Toledo has been probably the most consistent in the MAC, which kind of has had some fluctuation as far as successful teams. They've had, I think, 6 different conference champions in the last 6 years. So Candle, to your point, it might have just been time to look for somewhere else that he'd have some staying power. And the MAC too, when you look at it, I mean, Urban Meyer and Brian Kelly were now there decades ago, right? But the MAC as a conference has been a place where coaches kind of cut their teeth and move up with different levels of success obviously once they move up, right? So if you think about, obviously Urban Meyer, Nick Saban was at Toledo once upon a time, but thinking about someone like Dave Doran, who took Northern Illinois to then the BCS Orange Bowl. He left after winning the MAC, went to NC State. He's never been back on that stage since. That's something, I don't understand when coaches do that when, I know he was hoping to get back to a stage like that with NC State, but didn't. But again, when you see MAC coaches doing that, he's been at NC State now for well over a decade. Jason Candle might be able to come to UConn and stay more like a Randy Edsel than a Jim Mora, or hopefully, obviously, for not a negative reason like a Pasqualoni or Diaco.
Yeah, and PJ Fleck, who stayed for the bowl game after winning the MAC at Western Michigan and lost with the Cotton Bowl, or Peach Bowl, I think it was Cotton. But he's been at Minnesota, obviously Big Ten, so Power 4 conference. But him being at Minnesota has worked out for him. Even though if you compare Minnesota to who they fired or pushed out before, they haven't really eclipsed. I think they pushed out a guy who was 8-4, and they haven't really eclipsed that. So it's kind of funny, but Minnesota's in a bowl game every year. So if
they're chronically 7-5 basically.
Yeah, they'll get a big win or two, and then drop a surprising game. But if Candle views Connecticut as a place he wants to live for the foreseeable future, or again, just based on the potential because of the other athletic teams, because there'd be hopefully a shot at a conference. Although seeing Duke win the conference for the ACC, that won't guarantee UConn, if they were in the ACC, a playoff bid. If they're not 9-3 or 10-2, so, but obviously we want the ACC, and the hiring of Candle, you would hope, kind of is based, or him taking a job, you would hope is kind of based on that possibility. Even though it seems like Mora leaving is sort of rooted in him thinking we will never get there. But yeah, I think it does speak to, too, is David Benedict has had to get creative, especially since we are in football independence, a little bit of a creative situation. We're the only other independent right now, Notre Dame. We don't have the NBC deal that they do, so it's not really able to be compared, but choosing football independence in a way, Benedict has viewed it as trying to take a different situation, get creative to find success with scheduling, which he's done great at, and then hiring Mora, an outside the box idea, an outside the box candidate. Getting Mora here was big. Ended up being successful. Having a coach like that lends itself to being a coach being poached, but again, Candle, even though I know that guy on Twitter commented our list wasn't anywhere near the list, I think you're still waiting on a response, which I'm sure he's going to tweet back at you that he had Jason Candle as his first and only choice. That'll be forthcoming, I'm sure, but unless he was Dave Benedict on a
burner account.
Yeah, but I know they said, "Oh, we got our guy," but his official hiring was announced 2 weeks after Mora left, as well as Toledo's season ending. So I assume there was other candidates.
They kept everything close to the chest. Yeah. I mean, besides the one report that we saw about Terry Smith, there wasn't that many tweets or rumors.
It was really only Terry Smith who ends up staying on Matt Campbell's staff at Penn State. Yeah, other than that, I didn't really see the Tony Reno speculation. Yale, after their big comeback win at Youngstown State, which we talked about, and props to Yale. Obviously, we love Yale, as we've said, but Tony Reno lost by 8 at Montana State, the number 2 FCS team. yesterday. I know there was a late touchdown, but they lost by 8, and Illinois State picked off North Dakota State. Where our executive producer has experience working in Fargo from yesteryear. Um, in the Fargo Dome, they lose. So
Yeah.
Montana State has the inside track to win it all now, and Yale only lost by 8 on the road to them. So, Reno's a great coach, and maybe the timing didn't work out, but it's clear, again, that Dave Benedict also does not think like we do, which is a good thing. And
Yes.
he clearly had some outside the box thinking, and or however you want to phrase it, a candidate pool that was creative and a little, again, with Candle's case, maybe a forgotten rising coaching candidate who wasn't who was really never a flavor of the month, never really got the shot at the bigger school for one reason or another, yet is still only 46 and has been nothing but successful. So that's the key here. I think he's 46, has never had a losing season, done very well in the MAC, and has never had a shot at the bigger job. You could debate if UConn's a bigger job or not. We'll see if it becomes so. But it's really, I think, a good chance to take on a guy who may have been overlooked as a coach for for bigger schools in the last decade. And I hope it works out for UConn. And again, if this time in a couple years we're talking about him leaving for a Power Four school and UConn's not there yet, then hopefully, that means UConn's made maybe a different bowl than the Fenway Bowl. Although I love the Fenway Bowl and it was awesome. They made it and won it last year. I was kind of hoping for a change of pace, like the pinstripe or even military, where you might get I think Pitt's in the military and Penn State's in the pinstripe. So I was hoping for a
Yeah.
matchup. UConn's played Army before, so it's kind of not redundant, but it's great to be in a bowl. But hopefully, Candle keeps them going to bowls just like he has Toledo and just like Mora did. And if he leaves, again, it's just a sign of good times for UConn football. But hopefully, we're in a conference and he stays.
No, and yeah, to sum it up, I think the hire, as we analyze it, is a very good to great hire. Benedict did a great job getting someone like Jason Candle, as you said, a winner. Again, we talked about comparing someone to Kurt Signetti or just a proven winner that doesn't lose. Candle is that person. The UConn Huskies do go back to Boston to the Fenway Bowl later this month, where they will play Army, and then after that, it really is Candle's program to keep us on the right track, just like the last few years have been. And I think too, I think next year there's going to be a lot of buzz, expectations that being an independent, Candle continues not having losing seasons, continues winning seasons. The other independent, as you said, Notre Dame is not going to a bowl game, although we really like Marcus Freeman. We said before we didn't think Notre Dame should be in the playoff. We also thought they should play in a bowl, but that's their decision. UConn will carry the independent banner into Boston again, and I think too, it's just an exciting time as far as the possibilities for the Candle era at UConn for years to come. Matt, any last thoughts on Jason Candle before we kind of wrap this episode up and think about how the Huskies end with the bowl game and then go into the offseason as far as Candle being the guy to handle the transfer portal and recruiting?
No, that's kind of it. I just would like to say for the record that growing up, we were huge University of Notre Dame football fans. Still root for them in a way, but just for potential listeners and or group text conversations with friends and fellow UConn alumni, I did not think Notre Dame was deserving of the playoff or earned it. Unfortunately, despite how well they were playing the last 10 games, but I also don't love that they declined a bowl bid, considering they would go to a good bowl. I know Kansas State and Iowa State did the same thing with one coach retiring and another coach leaving. Those were a little bit of lesser teams and not really getting a major bowl bid with Kansas State at 6-6. But yeah, I did not think Notre Dame deserved the playoff, nor do I agree with them declining a bowl bid. But I know we do have some ghostwriters here at Duck and Rock blog, so we won't out the person who wrote about the Celtics and Hamden this week. I know that may have been seen by our loyal subscribers and followers, an article, so we'll keep that writer anonymous. But we did, as a collective, agree on naming a national champion today.
Yeah, like,
and if you think it's insane, this is not. I mean, Richard Nixon declared Texas a national champion. The AP declared the Joe Namath led Alabama team. For all the crying from SEC country, Alabama won a national title before the Orange Bowl, and Joe Namath lost to then not SEC, but their crybabies too down in Texas. They lost the Orange Bowl, and they were the national champion. And undefeated Arkansas, got the other poll national championship. But Auburn this year retroactively awarded themselves national championships, as well as Pitt has claimed national titles on the wall as well. So if there are any listeners in Indiana, just like UCF did, we are awarding you an old school fashion this season's national championship. So congratulations to Kurt Signetti and the Indiana Hoosiers. And again, if the bowl games didn't matter for Joe Namath, and if Richard Nixon, I believe he was a guy who may have done kind of whatever the hell he wanted a little bit. If he could declare national champion, then so can we.
Yeah, congrats to Indiana, the school's first football national championship. We thought about doing this for Oregon last year, our Duck brethren that we don't have a connection to, but we didn't award it to them. They were 13-0 Big Ten champs. We have our full statement up on duckandrocksports.com. And yeah, just like the old media polls, with all the, as we said in the statement, with all the back and forth of SEC bias, Notre Dame being a lightning rod, Miami not being ranked ahead of them, BYU, not being in a playoff situation at 11-1 before losing the conference championship, all the controversy, it might be time to go back to simpler poll era national champions, and Indiana won it. And Oregon, we didn't award it to them. They got crushed by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. Our SEC, our bias against the SEC might end if they beat Indiana in the playoff in the Rose Bowl, but we'll see what happens. At least Indiana has this one from Duck on Rock Sports. Also, we want to mention thank you to all of those who have been listening and reading. We've gained a lot of views, subscribers, people reading articles on duckandrocksports.com, watching the latest podcasts on YouTube, listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We appreciate all of you. Thank you for the views and listens. And now we actually want to invite you to be even further into the conversation. As Matt previously mentioned, we got some comments on Twitter, on YouTube that is good. We like when people disagree with us. We like respectfully going back and forth and giving each other more, opinions and listening and learning from each other. And that's the whole point of this that we talked about last spring when we started the podcast, and well over a year ago when we started the blog. So we appreciate you, and please keep listening and commenting and, disagreeing with us or agreeing with us, so we could have a full conversation that you are all involved in, whether it be about UConn football or any of the sports topics that we comment on this platform. Matt, do you want to take us home?
Yeah, and just quick things. Obviously, we have our Mike in Massachusetts, who is always a fan of ours, as well as a big contributor. Then this week we have a Mike in Connecticut, who also was very nice. But yeah, please follow us on our socials Duck Hunter Rock accounts, please unfollow me at McD21. I'd really love for some unfollows. It's well earned and well deserved. But thank you guys for listening, and looking forward to more podcasts ahead. And as always, thank you for being part of our flock.